All right, girls, I want to start with a riddle with you today. What doesn't the fish see? The answer? It's bowl. Or the water. That's a good answer, too. But you and me, we're just like the fish. You see, we walk around all the time without realizing that we're looking through a lens or a particular assumption about the way that we view the world. Some of us might be wearing cool guy glasses or stunner shades or rocking those 1950s librarian lenses. And I can think of a few of you who might be wearing the Marx Brothers shades. But all of us have a set of assumptions that we use to view the world, a set of glasses that we look through to interpret it. And today we're going to talk about those lenses in particular called critical lenses. So a critic, as you know, is one who analyzes, interprets, and evaluates. It's not just a grumpy old man. I think all of us walk around criticizing things all the time, and normally we view that as a negative trait when in fact it can be a very positive one. So let's take a look at the lenses that we might view the world through by asking just this one simple question: which jeans are the best? Some of you might be making that decision based on price, others on availability. Some of you might want to know if those jeans are eco-friendly, if they're made from organic cotton, and others might want to know if they have a celebrity connection, if they're famous. And depending on which answer you chose, you've decided what the most important thing, the most important evaluative tool for you is, and you've identified one type of critical lens that you wear. So thinking about critical lenses a little more specifically, it's a way of analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating the world's power dynamic. That part about the power dynamic might be a bit confusing for some of you, but think about it this way. Authors don't just write stories to entertain us. They write stories to shape the way that we view the world. They want to control the way that we think about morality, the things that we think are important, the ways that we spend our time, maybe even the ways that we vote in the polling booth. So when we use a critical lens, it's not just a way of understanding, but it's really a way of thinking about how the world works and how texts function to support that world. So our goal for the rest of this presentation is to define 4 commonly used critical lenses and then to apply them to various works of literature that we all have in common. So the first lens I want to talk about with you today is the psychological lens. This is a lens that we're all familiar with. We use it all the time in English classes. It's concerned with a character's behavior, motivation, or thoughts. So that's when we stop and ask a question like, why is Estella being so manipulative of Pip? Does she really trust Miss Havisham? Miss Havisham's such an evil woman. Or we ask questions about Pip's thoughts and internal monologue. Sometimes we take the psychological lens a step further, and we don't just analyze how the characters are behaving, but we think about how the author's beliefs about the world could influence his or her portrayal of a particular character. So is Pip meant to represent the average person, or is he a particularly good or bad human being? Does he have Christian values? Does Charles Dickens have Christian values? And can we draw some sort of parallel there? Additionally, we can look to the influence of culture on a particular character. Perhaps they represent a particular idea or movement in the culture at the time. The next lens I'd like to talk about with you is one we're also pretty familiar with. That's the feminist lens. And this one has a really overt political goal. Its goal is gender equality. I think there's a pretty major misconception about feminists generally, which is that they just want to empower women. And that's really not the case, because what feminists hope to do is achieve gender equality for all people. So that's men, women, people who are transgender, and oftentimes people who are gay. So the feminist lens asks questions about a text like how texts present and portray or ignore gender. So they might say that a male character is forced to enact really stereotypically male. Similarly, if you take a look at the texts that we've read this year, you can see that most of them are ignoring gender. We're not going to read a single text this semester that was written by a woman, and we're not going to read a single text this semester that was written about or by someone who is gay. So you can see that those are both areas where a feminist would take issue and raise a critique. The next lens that I'd like to share with you is a critical race lens. This one's very similar to the feminist lens, and it also has an overt political goal, which is racial equality. So it's going to ask questions about how a text presents or ignores issues of race. So again, if you look at the text we're reading this semester, we're only reading a single text written by a person who is a minority ethnically. And most of the texts that we're reading, excluding that one written by a minority, exclude minority characters. And that's pretty problematic, especially if you think about the composition of the world today. You can give Charles Dickens a little leeway because London was very white at the time of his writing the text. But when you consider what the United States looks like in the 1930s, it's a lot harder to give leeway to a text like Inherit the Wind. So the final lens I have to share with you today is the Marxist lens. And this one is the most complicated. So you probably recognize that name, Marxist, from the philosopher and political advocate Karl Marx, who was the father of communism. So the Marxist lens advocates for social equality in terms of wealth. It's very critical of the way our whole society is structured because we live in a capitalist society where people are rewarded for making more money, and we all strive to make more money. So we, as part of that society that's money hungry, are the bourgeois. And we're oppressed by our obsession with our stuff. We can't really live a happier, fulfilled life because we always want more stuff. So what Marxism tries to get us to do is to revolt against the wealthy. We're oppressed by the wealthy because because for all the work that we do, they collect more of that wealth that's generated than we do. And so they ruin the quality of our life and force us to try to substitute stuff for real happiness. And in that revolt, we would give power to the proletariat. That's the average person. It's the working class, the lower class. And Marxism asks us to reimagine the world without capitalism, which for many of us is a very difficult thing to do because we've been raised to have those capitalist values, to think that hard work equates with more money, equates with more happiness. So applying a Marxist lens to a text examines the way that we are forced to identify with people in the upper class or with the bourgeois, and a lot of times that we are ignoring the people in the lower class. Even if you think about Great Expectations, all Pip really wants is to be of a higher social class, and he's willing to do anything to gain that class status, including sacrificing his morality. Similarly, if you look at reality TV shows today, you can see that all of them are obsessed with people in the upper class. We've got the Real Housewives of every county in the world. We've got Keeping Up with the Kardashians. We've got The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. And even if those people are just acting, they're certainly portraying a class level that's much higher than our own. And we strive to be like them. And in striving to be like them and identifying with them, we are prevented from wanting to rebel against people who are probably our enemies, according to Marxism. So at this point, you all have 4 lenses to work with. And your job for tonight is actually a pretty fun one. Choose a fairy tale, any one that you like. And you're going to apply a minimum of 2 lenses to it. So you could choose the feminist lens and the Marxist lens, or the critical race theory lens and the psychological lens. And for each lens, you're going to write 1 paragraph explaining the lens's critique of the fairy tale. So what would a Marxist say about Rapunzel? Or what would a feminist say about Rapunzel? After you write those 2 paragraphs, you have 1 more paragraph to write me, and that's your reflection. Which lens do you most agree with, and why? I want you to think about that question because when we started this video, I asked you to think about the invisible lenses that you wear on your face every day. I think there's probably 1 lens that's closest to the way you already view the world. All right, girls, I look forward to seeing your analysis. Happy critiquing.